Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Transform 2022. My name is Damien Greathead, and I head up the advisor marketing team at Intuit Australia, and I'm your host for today's session. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, where I am in Sydney, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today's session is the second in this series and is called Getting Your Tech Right for Today and Tomorrow, and it's designed to help you do just that. The last 2 years have been crazy, to say the least, but as hard as they were, the pivot to work from home, our hybrid models have meant we were able to keep our businesses going and, more importantly, provide the help that our small business clients depend on to keep theirs going. But for many of us, that pivot happened fast, and the focus was on getting work out the door and helping our clients. The Band-Aid solution, all of the workarounds, meant that we may not be working as efficiently as we could be, and we're spending time on managing those workarounds or just maintaining a bit of a rickety system of cobbled together apps. For others, still using desktop solutions, the pandemic put a spotlight on their limitations, and many of you on the call today may be in the process of looking at a move to a cloud-based accounting solution. Work hasn't slowed down though, and it isn't likely to. That's why today we're going to look at the process of getting your technology right and the opportunities that open up when you do. We're going to cover the key questions you need to look at to determine what's working, what's not, and most importantly, what you want your technology to do and how to go about building that solution that delivers on your firm's goals, whatever they may be. Okay, first a little bit about us. I'm sure everyone on the call today is aware of Intuit's flagship product, QuickBooks Online. It's used by more than 300,000 accountants and bookkeepers around the world and more than 5.1 million small businesses. Some of you, however, may not be as aware of the functionality of QuickBooks Online accounting. It helps smaller accounting and bookkeeping firms to manage their clients, their workflow, and help with tracking their time and billing. On the compliance front, QuickBooks Tax, powered by Lodget, is an online tool to manage your tax and BAS preparation and lodgement needs. We've had hundreds of accounting and bookkeeping firms start using QuickBooks Tax over the last financial year, so if you haven't had a look, I'll tell you how you can get free access to QuickBooks Tax as a part of the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program at the end of today's session. Important as we inch closer to tax time. Before we do get started, let me take you through some of the housekeeping. We've got hundreds of people registered for today's event, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, submit it through the Slido chat panel, and we'll aim to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. Today's event is being recorded, so we'll be providing everyone who registered with a copy via email. So keep an eye out on your inbox for that recording if you want to share it with any of your team or review it later. If you're having technical difficulties with not being able to see or hear the presentation, we suggest restarting your device, refreshing your browser, or trying a different device. You can also navigate to the troubleshooting guide located at the bottom of the screen, which contains a link to alternate video browser. Again, you will receive a recording of the session, so while not as good as the live thing, you won't be missing out. Finally, we'll be running a couple of polls during the webinar. It's a great way to get you involved and to hear your thoughts. So keep an eye out for the polling section in the bottom right of your screen. And why not, let's try a poll straight out of the gates. A simple one to start. And since you're here on a webinar looking at solving your technology headaches, I can probably guess what the results will be already, but let's find out. So our first poll question, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being completely happy, how happy are you with your current tech stack? So just choose one of those options, folks, 1 to 10, number 10 being extremely happy with your current tech that you're using within your accounting firm. Responses are coming in. And as expected, for the most part, not seeing a lot of 10s, but we're sort of seeing in the middle ground there. So where probably some pieces are working, but there are other pieces that aren't working as well as they could be. And that's really what we want to focus today's session on. How do we identify those pieces that aren't working and then develop a strategy to go about and find new pieces of the puzzle to plug into your tech stack? So thank you very much for your input and also getting involved in today's poll questions. There's a couple more to come, so keep an eye out for that. Now that's the housekeeping out of the way, so let's move on to today's speaker. I'm excited to introduce Alan Fitzgerald from Practice Connections. Alan who many of you know as the software whisperer, has 30 years experience in technology, nearly 23 of those just in tax and accounting software. In 2015, based on demand from accounting firms, he established Practice Connections Advisory and offers independent and technology agnostic advice to firms big and small in practice management, workflow, tax, document management, and reporting solutions. Alan is regularly engaged to write and speak on the accounting tech market by CPA Australia, CPA Ireland, and the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, as well as the Tax Institute, and is also regularly engaged by corporate organisations to assist with developing accounting technology. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Alan.
Thanks for that introduction, Damien. That was great, and great to hear the program and initiatives that QuickBooks are running over the next couple of months, which is fantastic. The software whisperer, I can hear you sitting in the background going, what is he on about, the software whisperer? That was actually a name that a client called me during a board meeting when I was helping them out choose some software applications. You know, I liked it, stuck, so I mentioned it to a couple of other people and they thought it was funny too. Who am I? I am Alan Fitzgerald. So as Damien pointed out, I've been 30 years in technology. So I started off in the computer chip business for about 8 or 10 years. And then got into the fantastic world of tax and compliance software. Why do I call it the fantastic world of tax and compliance software? Because it is actually probably the most dynamic software market that you can possibly be in. I know that sounds kind of odd, but it's true because it is constantly evolving. The government keeps on changing the rules. Therefore, the software vendors have to keep up with those changes, and it's not something that you can do on a 2 or 3 year basis. It changes pretty much every single year. Now, part of that evolution, and this is what makes it so exciting, is that every iteration of the software, so there's obviously the compliance obligations that come through from the various regulatory authorities, such as the ATO or ASIC, but every iteration, they work out better, faster ways of doing things within the software. So this advancement in tax and accounting software is an absolutely fantastic area to be in. So if you've got kids that are interested in software and they're interested in accounting, I couldn't recommend anything better. So today, I charge like a wounded bull. I'm going to be straight up, like charge like a wounded bull. But today I'm going to share with you some of that experience that I have and the expertise and just the information that I've built up over the years for free as part of, and QuickBooks have invited me to do that for you. So this is going to be one element of a series that is going to happen over the next weeks and or months, so stay tuned on some of those areas. It will be basically to help you navigate and some other initiatives that QuickBooks have in this whole post-pandemic, getting back into reality, not quite so sure what everything is all happening at the moment, but it starts giving you some framework of some ideas to have. So what's happened over the last couple of years? Well, surprise, surprise, the pandemic was a kick in the guts for pretty much everybody, for not only the accounting firms, bookkeepers, but also the clients, obviously. Now, it then was a bit of an unwelcome change for many, obviously, and it forced the advancements of some of those, the plans for the long-term goals from a software, because the working from home scenario was a radical change from what was previously expected and was previously used to. So today's session is about whether you've made the change from desktop, client server, to the cloud, and now have actually got some breathing space to think about it, or if you're still on the desktop client server scenarios, about some of the things that you can do. So it's actually going to play the ball in both sides of the court. So today I hope will pay dividends for you, and it's going to be talking about what is possible for within your business. So let's get down to some of the nitty-gritty and we'll get into some of the details. Now, my contact details will be at the end of the slide, so there'll be a QR code, and one of the benefits, if you call it benefit of the pandemic, is that we all know how to use QR codes, and that will link through to my LinkedIn page. Now, I write extensively on LinkedIn, but you can also feel free to connect with me on there. Another observation is that I hate with a passion death by PowerPoint, so I always run my PowerPoint slides in reverse, so you'll actually see the numbers dropping down as we get closer to the end. Now that's hopefully going to engender one or two emotions. The first one is either going to be disappointment that the slideshow is coming to an end, or just a sense of overall relief. Well, hopefully it's disappointment. Now, so one of my philosophies whenever I talk to a firm is that it doesn't matter whether you're starting out, have an established bookkeeping or accounting firm, or are the owner of the business with a whole pile of employees. It's basically your job to create an infrastructure that is as efficient for yourself, for your team, and for your clients as possible. So I'm reminded of there's a fable which is about the gazelle in the African plain. Every morning when the gazelle wakes up, it knows that it has to outrun the slowest gazelle and the fastest lion. The lion also wakes up and it knows that it has to run faster than the slowest gazelle or it's going to starve. So it doesn't matter whether you are the lion or the gazelle, when the sun comes up, you better be running. And that's kind of where technology in accounting firms is happening here, is that there has been a lot of shift, and it's about the firms that are utilizing the technology are the ones, it's not the technology itself, it's the firms that are going to be utilizing the technology. So the firms that I've worked with over the years, once they take the time to actually match the software to their goals, I wrote a piece a couple of years ago now, where I talked about the old fabled, the proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. It doesn't. It actually starts with a plan. You got to know where you're going. And so once you understand what your goals are, you can then match the technologies to those goals that will best enable you to achieve them. So the firms that do this find that they maybe get to choose their ideal client. Wouldn't everybody like to choose their ideal client? They can create a different lifestyle for themselves because they've got the freedom to work from anywhere. They might say, you know what, I'm working a 4-day week. And that's obviously a different lifestyle as well. So one of my best examples of this was a client of mine that I set up probably 18 months ago now, 24 months ago. He wanted to get out of Melbourne City and he wanted to retire to the countryside, but he didn't want to give up his accounting firm. So he made the choice of maintaining the Collins Street address with the country regional Australia lifestyle. Now, part of what enabled him to do that was that we went through an exercise, and I do this with all of my clients, is that the common themes that I see across all of the firms. Now, what you'll find, particularly if you're on the older client-server desktop software, that's known probably a little bit rudely as Abandonware, because there's not much development, or if any, going into that software. All of those vendors are now looking forward into the cloud space, or hybrid, certainly as the case is with some vendors. And that's not a step forward. That's actually a kind of like a holding pattern more than anything else. So what has happened and how these suites ultimately developed, or previously developed, was that someone came up with the idea, let's create argument's sake, practice management suite. Well, we need tax. So they bought a tax solution, or they tried to develop a tax solution. Now, the gaps in years meant that softwares were written in different languages. Now, that's fine today because of what's known as the API in the cloud world. But in the older client server desktop, it posed a lot of problems because you literally had different programs written in different languages trying to communicate, and it just doesn't work. And that was part of the reason that the systems were, whilst they were a suite, and the mantra was you have to have a suite to compete, they didn't actually, there was a lot of workarounds that had to be done within there. So the productivity, I use productivity here, you had a lot of manual processes, the collaboration was often quite difficult. Finding documents, there was a statistic, probably made up, but that accountants spend anything up to 30% of their time looking for stuff. Multiple touch points, you name it. The productivity was affected by that, which led into frustration, finding those documents, and those multiple touch points. The systems, so the tax and finance systems, that could be the reporting on there, the increased manual processes, so they're looking for ways of reducing those processes, and then the future planning, so kind of what we're doing today. So it's talking about strategy, succession planning. It might be something that's quite topical for some of you. Acquisition reviews. Is there an opportunity to merge with another firm, and what do the technologies that we have in place, will they enable us to seamlessly merge with another firm? It can actually be about staff retention. Could even be about client retention, but it's about staff retention and attracting staff as well. Now, I've done plenty of projects where I know where new staff have walked in the door and later they turned and walked out the door again because of the systems that the firms were using. And I've got very clear examples of those. But the key thing is if you've moved to the cloud, it's an opportunity now, particularly if you moved to it during COVID, it's an opportunity to sit back and take a look and review, take a deep breath basically, review and see what you've got. If you haven't moved or haven't made the move and are thinking about it, now is the opportune time to actually sit back and plan about those sort of things. So if you're concerned about cloud, please don't be. It is far from being in its infancy. It is I guess it's learned to walk. It's like Usain Bolt these days more than anything else. And it's constantly developing. So rather than getting R&D updates or development updates every quarter or every 6 months, they're coming through on a regular basis, which is fantastic. So what happened over the last couple of years? So this is by far probably one of the most popular slides that I've put up on LinkedIn in a very long time. So this is known as the Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation curve. Don't worry about it, it's just a curve. But fundamentally, what you see, you'll see the little blood drop down in the bottom left-hand corner. They're the bleeding edge. So they're the guys that stand outside the Apple store for 2 days and we gotta have that Apple product, which leads through then to how does that product then ultimately move through through the buying process. So you have the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, then the laggards. Now, for anybody that was in the software world over the last 2 years, anyone that was on the left-hand side of that curve, they found it a lot easier to do the whole work from home scenario than the firms that were on the right-hand side of the curve. Now, the curve is an interesting one because also, if you're a firm that's on the left-hand side of the curve, by the time you start to get to the end of that ladder, the early majority, they're already looking at the next thing. So they start to leap bounds. So they're already looking at what else is coming out, what other new stuff. I've achieved some benefits here. What else can I get? Now this curve also applies to vendors. So the further to the right that the vendors are, as soon as that curve starts going up, they're further and further behind, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to try and get back up. And this is why we see today some of the largest vendors in Australia that have been around for decades, struggling to bring new products to the marketplace, whereas an opportunity, such an example as a QuickBooks comes in and says, hey, look, we actually have a cloud product right now available, etc. It's here and now. So they don't have to have that maintenance of the older product suite. And this is where the challenge arises, because as that curve progressively goes up, it's the risk of falling further and further behind. If you think about the analogy of Kodak actually inventing the digital camera and then shelving the idea, because it's like, well, we've got to protect the other industry, which is the film processing industry. So therefore we won't release this new technology. They got left behind because they should theoretically be ahead of the game, but they didn't capitalize on that particular scenario. So this curve is very, very important when it comes to evaluating where you are when you are looking at your technology. Are you on the left, those early adopters, or are you on the right, which is the late majority or the laggards? So this is, often I use this at the beginning of my presentations, and then I use it at the very end to say, where would you like to be? So this is a really good tip to be able to think about that. This leads into a great quote, and this is a fantastic book. If you get the opportunity and you've got some downtime, it's a highly recommended book to do, James Clear's Atomic Habits. And one of the key things that I take out of this is this particular statement, is that if you have goals and you're using older software, you're actually been hemmed by your software rather than your goals. So it's the opportunity to reevaluate what you're going to be using into the future and take that scenario where you can go, I'm going to plan, for argument's sake, we're going to grow by X number, bang, I need the software that will enable me to achieve those goals. I understand that it can be very difficult to change software, but you have to go through that, for argument's sake, pain. Generally it's not, but that pain, perceived pain, in order to improve. And so it's no pain without gain, so to speak, or no gain without pain. So the other thing that cloud does for you, if you've, and some of you would have already experienced this, is that there are fewer moving parts. So the biggest one, I suppose, in that is the no need to have a server sitting in the corner. Now, this was, I actually I helped a 5-seat firm about 3 weeks ago, because they were given a proposal. They needed to change their software, their own desktop software. They decided to come to me because their IT provider had given them a quote for about $25,000 to replace their server, plus the ongoing plus. Everything's plus. And they thought, what are our options? What can we do here? And when I sat down with them and I ran through a couple of the options with them, they realized that yes, there was a cost to go to the cloud, but it was approximately half of that of what it was just for the server component. But it actually then enabled them to do so much more. So they would pose, we want to do this. Yeah, you can do that. And this is how you do that within that software. Oh my God. So they're actually about to experience a revolution in the way that they do things, but it's going to benefit them enormously. So the cloud and the moving to cloud will increase your productivity, will give you access to information, but it's all around best of breed applications. And this is the thing, when you have a suite, you're limited by the capabilities of those suites. When it comes to cloud, you've got options as to what solution is going to work best for you. So the benefit of cloud is that even as a bookkeeper, even as a one-man accounting firm, you actually have access to information or the softwares that are used by some of the biggest accounting firms in the world for a fraction of the cost of what it used to cost years ago. And that's one of the key things. It's a whole pile of information in the palm of your hands. And that's the really exciting component of it. This always comes up in the conversation, apropos the $25,000 server side of things. There's always in my meetings, particularly in multi-partner firms, oh, we spent all of this money on this software. What about the investment that we've made in it? By virtue of the fact that you're able to have a conversation like that, typically means that that software has served you well. And that software is kind of like a car that's done 250,000 kilometers. It might be 20 years old. Compared to a new car, the new cars have got bells and whistles in them that couldn't have even been imagined in older cars. And it comes at a lower cost and it's more efficient. And that's fundamentally the analogy that I use, is that it does fundamentally the same thing, so it gets you from A to B, but it does it with more comfort, faster, better, more efficiencies, and so forth. So the challenge is that if you've got a 20-year-old car, you've got a lot of maintenance on it, you've got a lot of work that has to be done on that to make sure that it still runs. It'll still do the job. I'm not dissing it, it'll still do the job. However, there are better alternatives out in the marketplace. Most of the time as well is that the older software applications, you're paying a monthly maintenance fee for the right to access that software. Now that monthly maintenance fee is for R&D and monthly maintenance, so the research and development on that platform. Generally, the software now has more, they put in features for the sake of putting in features, because if you're still on their maintenance programs, they're basically saying, well, how can we charge these guys money, or how can we justify the fees that we're charging? So they put in features that you invariably never use. So one of the things that I'm often quoted as saying is that when it comes to complex systems, actually in life in general, when things get out of control and it's all kind of crazy, nobody ever says, let's go back to complexity. Everybody says, come on guys, let's just get back to basics. Now, basics isn't a derogatory term for the software applications. Basic is saying, what do firms basically need to run a business? And then those third-party apps that I mentioned before, you plug in the ones that suit what your goal for your business is going to be. And that's the really cool thing about it, is that you actually have the freedom of choice to choose what you want, rather than something that a software vendor says, hey, because you're paying us money, we put in this feature for you. So it's one of those things. It's been a rethink on processes, and it's a rethink on how software works in the 2020s, rather than for a lot of these softwares that were written back in the 1990s, in the very early 1990s. We're living in two vastly different times. And so you have software that is designed for today rather than software that was designed for a different period in time. So how do you get there? Here's a really good start. I mean, this is just some general tips and tricks that I hope that will be beneficial to you. Now, very few firms have got a dedicated IT department or a dedicated help desk. But all the firms have fundamentally the same of a large organization. I remember being at the Accounting Business Expo in Sydney a couple of years ago, and I hosted a tax talk about the processing tax and how work comes in and out of the firm. And I had a friend of mine who was the administrator for one of the big four firms. And every accountant was giving their gripes about how the systems were on their table. And I said, would you like to hear how the big four, how they do it? And everybody went, yeah, that'd be fantastic. And she turned and she said, we're the exact same as you guys. And so don't feel discouraged, I suppose, that it's only you having the problem when it comes to some of these IT issues. The big guys have the same things as well. So the key things that I look at doing it. So as I mentioned, get back to basics. Actually strip back and say, if I was to start all over again, how would I do it and what would I have in order to be able to do the work that I want? So look at the importance of buy-in. What does that mean? Well, it's basically talking to your team and talking to your staff. What works, what doesn't work? If I gave you a magic wand, what would be your ideal process? And this is the key thing. Technology can do anything that you want these days. There is the boundaries of how deep your pockets are and your appetite for risk, but fundamentally they can do anything that you want. The goal setting, the project planning, but fundamentally start off with something simple. So that's the key thing, is be able to look at and empowering yourself or someone else to get you the information that you need to be able to reevaluate your systems. So let's look at some of the things that we can look at from this side of things. Now, before we do, this is a very popular slide of mine, and it just goes to show you the technology and how people use technology. So what we're seeing now is more on the very, very right-hand side, is that how people access information. So we're obviously Web 2.0. That's the YouTube generation fundamentally. So you would have heard about Web 3.0. Don't worry about that for a long time. It's not going to be something that will affect accounting firms, in my opinion. So the legacy technologies, as I mentioned before, does not reflect a way that we do business today. So the future, in my opinion, is going to be a mix of mobility and data. And that's where you see that right-hand side of that column. And that is where you'll see more of that in the newer technologies, particularly in the cloud space. Data analytics is going to be a game changer, because people, i.e. your clients, are going to want to know more about how you are going to be helping their business. And so in order to be able to understand that, you need to be able to analyze the information that your systems are providing to you. So there's tools, and we'll go into a couple of those later on. Power BI, you've probably got it, you're probably sitting on it, and you're probably not even utilizing, or you may be. But these are tools that are part and parcel of your Microsoft Office suite and are incredibly powerful within there. The benefit of doing all of this stuff is that it allows you to identify your niche client, and niches are riches. Sounds better if you're American, niches are riches, or niches are riches, as they say over there. But niche, being able to, your client base is full already of your ideal clients. Being able to sort the wheat from the chaff allows you to focus on those ideal clients and the work that you enjoy doing in that space. So the clients themselves are more sophisticated than ever. I've spoken about the mobile generation. You can run entire businesses just simply using your mobile phone. It's part and parcel of doing business today. And that then in turn leads into the collaboration and how people want to collaborate. So the expectation from the clients is that the process is going to be simplified, and that firms can and will, because they're paying you to, will make life easier for them. And the firms that do that, going back to one of those original slides, that use the technology well, will be the ones that will certainly will have a lot easier way of getting through technology. So let's look at some simple checklists, and these will be available to you obviously as well. IT plan. I am astonished at the number of firms that I deal with, and I've been doing this for 23 years, that do not have an IT plan. They may have had one, they don't refer back to it, they don't update it, and too many firms view IT as a cost rather than an investment. That stuff's got to change. That really has to change. So the other thing that I get people to do is to stress test their incumbent vendors. I'm vendor independent, so I don't get paid by any of the vendors to spruik their wares. Stress test them. What are you doing, guys? What's the next stage? What's coming next? What's coming next? What's coming next? You know, put the pressure on them because that's how they generate their business and generate their revenues. Does the software that you're using reflect the firm? So you might have bought it 10 years ago, but does it reflect the firm that you are today? Does it reflect the needs of your firm for the next 10 years? So what is the software that you're using to be able to do that? Has your firm changed? I remember selling a server to an accounting firm, it's a long time ago now, but they phoned up and you said, 12 months later, they said, your server doesn't work. And I said, well, how do you mean? And they said, well, you know, it keeps on falling over. And I went, oh, okay, so how many staff are? Oh, we've doubled. Okay, well, that wasn't in the plan. You didn't anticipating doubling, so you have to invest for doubling and invest the resources in order to be able to do that. Have you increased number of partners, number of staff? Are people doing more work remotely? BCP, business continuity planning. Now, very few firms have business continuity planning with the pandemic. It's not a criticism. Now it's not an excuse not to have a business continuity plan because of what happened. It needs to be something that's factored into your IT plan. Just some high-level overviews, and they're food for thought things. How I assist firms go through the process is I try and talk to, and you can do this yourself, is I try to identify common themes throughout the firm. When you're making change or you've identified that change is required, you need to ensure that it caters for everyone from the front desk right through to the partner level. Because the old saying was, give a partner a laptop and he'll think that the IT system is fantastic. You've got to make sure that everybody's concerns, the challenges that they have, are all addressed. So I do actually do that from reception through to partner. When I engage with a firm, and I really encourage you to do that because that's where the gold is. Where you understand where the obstacles are to processing work within the firm, you suddenly realize that there potentially is a better way to be able to manage that. And the key thing is to aim for some early wins. Get the quick return on the investment, break-even points, whatever the scenario is, but also to reward innovation. Now, you won't have innovation unless you allocate some time and you encourage it to make it happen. A good way of doing this is interviewing some of your trusted clients. How are we, what if scenarios? What if we were able to do this? Or what do you want from us? What would be your ideal service from us? And then you map the technologies in order to be able to provide that based on the feedback that they get. Everybody wants to talk. Everybody wants their opinion to be heard. And so it's an opportunity to basically say, what can I do for you? Or how best can we work together? I hate the question, what keeps you awake at night? So please don't use that. That's a bit of it kind of doesn't work. I focus on more what works. If I'm talking to a staff member, what works, what doesn't work for you. And I talk about it giving them a magic wand. So I said, forget about your reliance on this software. If you were to come in and you had no preconception about what your software needed to do, what would you like it to do? And that's where you start to understand where the limitations of existing software, or maybe some of the software applications that you're using if you've gone to the cloud world, and it's like, it's food for thought, and it's the opportunity to be able to make some changes within there. Do a SWOT analysis. We all know about SWOT analysis, so the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So strength and weakness, that's internal to the business. Opportunities and threats, external to the business. And it's a really good way of sitting down, even brainstorming amongst the team, basically saying, let's look at this. And once you have that kind of information, you can actually start making rational decisions based on the information that's presented to you. The key thing is you've got to put the right the right team in. If you have squeaky wheels within your organization, they are gold. They are the absolute, they know the information. They know where the areas are wrong, and they're the ones that are frustrated and want to fix things, and will tell you sometimes quite upfront, every negative is a positive. But you have to approach it with the fact saying, don't come to me with the problem, come to me with the solutions. Basically, if I can help you, how can I help you? Tell me what the issue is and how do you think it can be helped, and we'll do the work and we'll try and fix that problem for you. Because with this, the staff mobility at the moment, it's a real challenge for firms. And so it's basically that encouraging and keeping things, the wheels oiled, so to speak. So I've got a couple of simple mantras to consider within that. As I mentioned before, journey of 1,000 miles doesn't start with a single step. It actually starts with a plan. You have to have a plan. I'm a bit of a, what's the word I'm searching for? I don't really like preferred tech stacks from integrators. And what I mean by that is that you'll see a lot of these advertisements going out saying, oh, this is our preferred tech stack. And they have a mix that works, and generally it works well. However, it's designed fundamentally for them. So for the integrator to be able to easily manage, because they don't have to manage all of these different applications, rather than you, because you might want to use a piece of software that matches your goals. So just be very careful on that. Like asking your barber if you need a haircut. Very difficult to talk to your incumbent supplier and say, are there any other software solutions? Because they're obviously going to say, none as good as ours. We talked about tech not being a direct replacement for staff, but can actually assist the staff that are there. So it's basically a bolstering of the staff requirement. And there's a couple of others. And one of my favorite ones on that is that, if you're putting in a lot of automation because of your older systems, just review the process, because a bad process automated is just a bad process made faster, really. So you have to ensure that if the process is because of the limitations of the software, or is it just a bad process? All right, so that's a couple of things in there. Now, Damien mentioned in his opening introduction a couple of solutions that are out in the marketplace. Obviously, QuickBooks and Lodgements from a tax. These are some of the things that you can take a look at if you haven't already. And this doesn't matter if you, as I said, if you're already in that cloud journey or if you're thinking about the cloud journey, because there's some definite ones in there that are going to suit a lot of people. And this allows you to build your toolkit. This is basically a building up that toolkit. So Lodgements is probably one of the best tax applications. And I'm not saying that because they are part of QuickBooks. It is one of the best tax applications in Australia. Now, I've been on numerous tax podcasts, a tax dedicated podcast with the Tax Institute. I've spoken on a variety of things, and just purely on tax, and Lodgements always comes out on that in the top rankings of that. So it's got a feature set to rival any kind of vendor, be that client server, so desktop or cloud. So it's definitely worth taking a look at. Carbon, if you haven't seen Carbon in action, bookkeepers, accountants love Carbon. It is an awesome piece of software. There's really nothing quite like it out in the marketplace at the moment. So it's definitely worthwhile. And they've actually just got this massive cash injection. So I'm looking forward to seeing a couple more things on that. Dext, used to be known as Receipt Bank, got some very clever tools. Now, obviously, people would know them from the receipt capture perspective, but they've got the tools to be able to analyze what's happening in the firm. They've got tools to analyze information coming for your clients. And basically like mini audit tools for your clients as well. KeyPay, payroll for not only for your clients, but also for your internal staff. But the one that I always talk about, because it is so underused and you're sitting on it already, is Microsoft Office. So one of these things is that everybody assumes that Microsoft Office is your Excel, Word, Outlook, and more recently Teams. Office is so much more than that. Office can replace many of the apps that are sold in the marketplace. And yes, you do have to get them, you do have to pay to have them tailored for what you want, what you need, but you're basically already paying for the software suite. If you're using Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft 365, say standard business solutions, you've got about, you can see the solutions in the top right hand corner. You're sitting on a whole pile of value. It's probably $200, maybe $300 worth of applications that are sold as third-party tools per month. That is already something that you're sitting on. So it's a very, very small component that's often overlooked, and it's even by big firms. I'm talking to a very large firm at the moment who goes, actually, we could do with some help with Microsoft Office, because the perception is Office is Excel, Office is email, Office is Word, whereas Office is so much more than that. So I do encourage you to talk to your local provider of Microsoft Office and see what they can do for you with regards to that suite. Capitalize on your Microsoft Office platform. Nobody has ever been fired for buying it. All right, it's just genius for what it can do. So now, key things: project planning. If you're going to do this, you got to work out what's needed. You got to work out then who's going to do it. Who's going to do what in this whole process? Do you have the resources, and how are you going to get it all done? That is one of the key things. But the absolute number one factor from project planning is Hofstadter's law. Now, this is a kind of tongue-in-cheek self-referential law. It always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. So when someone says to you, "Oh yeah, we'll have it done by the end of March or the end of April," yeah, add on some time on that just to give you some buffer space, and then when you've added on that time, add on just a little bit more just to be sure. And that's one of those key things, is to understand where, because things change and things take time. You're busy, they're busy. Generally, the roadblock is the firm and getting the information, because there's still so much work to get out the door. And if you're on the client server side, software side of things, it's even worse, because the access to the information can sometimes be even harder to get. We're coming to the end, folks. We're coming to the end. So, successful rollout. When you've got it, you've got to plan for both now and into the future. When you build it, you've got to, when you buy it, you've got to put the systems in that are going to support you and your customers. You've also got to manage it. So you've got to run this thing so that it basically helps you and delivers and supports the goals. Sorry, I got them the other way around. So you've got to run them into the point that they're actually delivering what they expect to deliver, which is great. And you've got to review it. This stuff it's constant. It's not going to change. It is something where it's basically a rinse and repeat. And I think I have that down there. Yeah, rinse and repeat. So it's a constant cycle of going through what's coming out into the marketplace. It's always having the ear to the ground. It's particularly, if you see, this is one thing I mentioned at a QuickBooks conference many moons ago. If you had looked at it, if something was of interest to you but didn't quite fit the mark, say a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, revisit it again. Because the biggest mistake that I've seen in accounting firms is that they look at a piece of software and say, "Oh, we looked at that software, it didn't match what we needed to do." And that's then, bang, that's pretty much it, blocked from that time on. You'd be amazed at the capabilities of software that you looked at a couple of years ago. 99% of them are not the same software that you looked at. So if something piqued your interest a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, but you chose not to look at it, or chose not to go further with it, look at it again. Because in that time, with the speed of R&D, there would be amazing amounts of change. And that kind of then flows into, from a staffing perspective, is that you have to maintain and review what you've got. Now, the easiest way that I've found to do this is to, if you can, review any kind of help desk logs or questions that are asked from using a particular piece of software. So from a help desk perspective, if you're making too many calls to the help desk, or your staff are making too many calls to the help desk or the support line, obviously some training is required. If they're not making any telephone calls to the help desk or support line, training is required, because they guarantee you they are not utilizing the capability of the software. Most of the applications that I see in accounting firms these days, the demand is we won't buy the software until it's got 80, 90% functionality, but most firms only end up using about 10% of the functionality that exists within it. So there's a wide gap of software that is required within there. So hopefully that information was of value to you. I hope it was. I had great fun presenting it today. That was the last slide. So we've covered a lot of ground. Now I think we've got a Q&A session coming up in a second. I'm also going to be writing some next steps with QuickBooks. They've asked me to write some articles for you. That'll help you take what you've learned today, digest it in a bit more palatable format, hopefully, and then apply a lens across on your own firm and the goals, and what you've heard today, map the technologies and what you can do for your business within there, and build it ultimately into a plan. Now, there's some other events that are coming up from QuickBooks, that'll be quite exciting, and I'm looking forward to appearing at those as well. And we'll take a deeper dive into a lot of those particular areas. So I'm going to hand back to Damien. I think he's got some questions that have come through. So Damien, over to you. What's coming up next, mate?
Alan, thank you so much for an amazing presentation. I just fascinated in terms of the changes that we've gone through over the last couple of years, and now how do we actually pivot, take a step back and make sure that the technology is working for us, move away from this Band-Aid approach. I know the next end of financial year deadline is quickly looming, but we do want to make sure that we take some time out of our day-to-day to think critically about the technology that we're using. So thank you so much for that, Alan. Obviously covered a lot of ground, and we'll be providing a bunch of guidance on working through this process over the coming weeks, including additional events that we've got coming up as well. Alan, I'm excited to share, is also going to be speaking at our Get Connected event in May. So keep an eye out on your inbox for upcoming details about our live and virtual conference that will be coming up for accountants and bookkeepers specifically in May. We're excited for those. So that will be live in Sydney, and we'll be taking the event out on the road to a couple of cities as well. So keep an eye out for more details there. Right, before we jump over to the questions, and we've had quite a few come through, which I'm excited about, just going to do a quick shameless plug. If you're looking to transform in 2022, one of the best ways to do that is to look at the heart of your accounting and bookkeeping solution and make sure you're using the smartest tools available. I know you've been very hard at work over the last 18 months, 2 years, helping your clients keep them going. We at Intuit QuickBooks have also been hard at work over the last couple of years, focused on QuickBooks Online Accountant to help you work more efficiently and grow your practice. We want to be able to help you manage your workflow, track your time, lodge BAS and tax returns, invoice clients, all in the one spot. And the best part of that is it's free for QuickBooks Pro advisors. So with tools like Books Review, within QuickBooks QBOA, QuickBooks Online Accountant, you can reduce your BAS prep time by as much as 40%. You can also save time and effort with simplified workflows and tools like Prep for Taxes that let you finalize client books on a single screen, correct on the spot, then seamlessly transfer that data directly to a client's tax return in QuickBooks Tax. So there's a lot to learn and a lot to see, and we'd really encourage you to join the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program, which is free, has a whole bunch of benefits, and our Convert and Grow campaign is designed to help you do that, convert from old legacy systems onto QuickBooks Online so you can enjoy the benefits of that. To learn more, head to intuit.me/ProPerks, and we'll also send you all the information at the following today's webinar. But without further ado, let's jump on to some questions, Alan.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to these, Damien.
You're ready to go. Alan, you mentioned a few times that the cloud solutions and some of the other apps can help boost efficiencies. How exactly do they do that? I mean, efficiency, how does it boost efficiency and productivity?
Yeah, okay. Well, if you look at, let's use practice ignition, or ignition as they're called these days, a good example. That allows you to set out an engagement letter to also then capture the revenue from that. So it's not just an engagement letter, these are the services. It actually starts to capture the billing component of it as well. And so, hey presto, you've eliminated some admin tasks. Now, a lot of firms come to me and they say, well, not all of our clients are going to use or not going to want that scenario. It's like, okay, well, you mentioned, Damien, for example, BAS and IAS. You know that you have to do those tasks on a monthly and or quarterly basis for your clients. Well, why not save you the effort and improve both yourselves and your clients' cash flow by amortizing those payments over a 12-month period, and sign them up on a simple arrangement with Practice Ignition, and hey presto, it's done. So that's a very easy way from an efficiency perspective.
And also, let's not jump to conclusions that our clients won't do this. Our clients are looking for ways to simplify their life, to better manage their cash flow. Yep. So don't always jump to that conclusion that my clients won't be interested in Absolutely. These ideas that I'm bringing to the table.
100%, absolutely.
Right. Next question. Do my clients all need to be on the same system? Do I need to go all in on a particular software?
No, that's kind of, if you think about it, whilst I generally fill up at the same servo, I can actually go to any servo to get petrol. So it's one of those things that I'm not going to say I'm just going to purely go to that particular servo because of X. It's like, no, yes, it does provide petrol, but so do all of the other ones. So to say to a client, you have to use this particular piece of software, yeah, it doesn't quite work that way, because your clients are going to be all different sizes, all different shapes and forms. So it's basically, I know of firms that say, we're going to mandate if you come on, it's going to be this. That has lasted 6 or 12 months, and they just found it too hard, because a client will come up and say, I really want to work with you, and I understand what you're saying. However, for me to make that change, to make your life easier, is going to cost me X amount of tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not prepared to do it. Do you want my business or not? Yeah, okay. So it's just impractical. If anybody says to you, oh, if you move to a system, they're going to force you to change anything, don't believe it. It is just wrong. So I would complete Furphy that one.
And I think as well, if you look at, say, the Zero App Marketplace and apps.com from QuickBooks, you'll see that the applications are both sitting there. So the applications that you've been talking about, they support multiple general ledgers, and just as your clients have those needs as well.
100%.
Last question, Alan, because of time. Data security and privacy, or confidentiality, obviously key for advisors and their clients. How are these issues being addressed in the cloud? It's sort of surprising that we're still talking about that, but what's your advice to practitioners that have security concerns?
Look, the cloud is these days well, it's kind of always been, but it's more secure than the box in the corner, because the data is constantly backed up, not only in one spot, but in multiple spots. You can layer tools. There's a product for accounting firms called Practice Protect, and that just layers software over the top. So I won't go into the details because of time, but it's a very clever application for enabling to do that. But you're at more risk of having a server in your office, of either losing it through fire, or think of Lismore. Think of the accounting firms in Lismore, and I'd hate to, and my best wishes go out, that are under 5 feet of water. 5 meters of water. 5 feet would be a dream. But it's so if you have a client server and your office is flooded, your data is gone unless you've built up that the data integrity. That goes back to that slide I mentioned about the BCP, or the business continuity planning. When you're in the cloud, you don't have issues with business continuity planning. All you need is a location and to be able to access your data. So if you can sit down in the library with your mobile phone with a tablet, you can actually do work in the cloud. Whereas client server, you're actually aiming back to that server. So unless it's in the cloud, your data's gone. So from a cybersecurity perspective, we trust banks with our money, and that's basically they all use the same level of security as banks do.
Absolutely. And my one tip would be obviously don't tap into the free Wi-Fi at the cafe or the library. Hotspot off your phone. That's going to
Yeah.
create that secure connection that you need. So just make a reminder to everyone, and remind your teams about that security side of things. We've got a bunch more questions which we haven't been able to get to, but
Okay.
we're going to share those with Alan. He's going to write some responses, and we'll get those onto our blog
Cool. Love
and
to.
out to attendees via email. But before we do go, and before we wrap up, just want to do a quick poll question. Just activated a new poll in the bottom right of your screen. If you would like a member of the QuickBooks team to contact you about QuickBooks Online Accountant, QuickBooks Tax, any of those new features and functionalities that I've spoken about, simply click yes on that poll response, and we'll have one of the team contact with you within the next 48 hours via the number or email that you've registered with. So if you want to learn more about QuickBooks Tax, QuickBooks Online Accountant, and some of that functionality that allows you to better manage your firm, just click on yes, and we'll get in touch with you in the next 48 hours. That brings us to the end of today's session, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have found today's webinar valuable. I picked up a bunch of great stuff from Alan, and I hope you can take that out into your accounting firm. We'll be taking a deeper dive into getting your technology right at Get Connected in May, so keep an eye out for more details on that. And we've also got our regular Pro Power Hour webinar taking place in late March, looking at cash flow, and in April, looking at the federal budget. We've also got a whole bunch of QBO training, QBOA training. So visit quickbooks.intuit.com/au/events. Don't worry, we'll email you that link to find out more. Alan, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much
Pleasure.
for sharing your insights, and we look forward to seeing you in person at Get Connected and doing more with you throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody.